My fiancée confessed she's pregnant with my business partner's baby and told me, be mature. Don't throw away what we have over a small mistake. So, I got my brutal revenge. That is the headline I never thought I would be typing at 3 in the morning with a flat soda for company, but here we are. Welcome to the dumpster fire of my life. I am 32, the owner of a commercial HVAC company in Phoenix I built from absolute zero. I own nothing then but rage. The Thursday my life imploded started with a catastrophic chiller failure at an office building. My crew busted their backs for 14 hours straight, replacing compressors while tenants screamed about the 100-degree heat. My hands were raw from refrigerant oil and duct tape residue, my shirt soaked through with sweat that had dried and wet 3 times. I drove home exhausted, thinking about surprising Jocelyn with dinner. I actually believed I was building a future, but I was just financing my own execution. Wade's black Silverado was parked in my driveway when I pulled up. It was not unusual since we often went over client presentations. But the house was completely dark. I walked through the front door into a living room that felt like a funeral home. Jocelyn sat on one end of the leather sectional, mascara streaking her face in black rivers. Wade sat on the other end, staring at the floorboards like they held the secrets of the universe. The air tasted like guilt. Jocelyn took a deep, shaky breath and whispered that she was pregnant. My first instinct was pure, stupid joy, the kind that makes you smile before your brain catches up. I started walking toward her until Wade finally looked up. His expression was a toxic mix of fear and defiance. It's mine, bro, he said, his voice cracking like a teenager. The baby is mine. We tried to stop, but the attraction was too strong. The room tilted sideways, spilling my reality onto the floor. That was when they delivered the pitch that still makes me want to put my fist through a wall. Wade leaned forward, clasping his hands together, like he was selling a maintenance contract. He actually suggested we could navigate this maturely to protect the business partnership. Jocelyn nodded along, claiming she was confused and needed my support during this complex time. They looked at me with expectant eyes, waiting for me to agree to a 3-way custody arrangement of their betrayal. I did the math in my head instantly. 6 months. They had been sleeping together since New Year's, right when we landed the biggest contract of my career. While I was grinding myself into dust working 16-hour days to pay for her engagement ring, they were building a family in my bed. I did not scream. I did not fight. I just turned around, walked out the door, and realized the company I built was currently being held hostage by my enemies. I drove aimlessly for an hour before ending up at Gavin's apartment. He opened the door holding a slice of pepperoni pizza, took one look at my face, and stepped aside without a word. Gavin runs a plumbing outfit and knows the smell of a disaster. I sat on his worn recliner and told him everything while staring at a water stain on the ceiling. He listened in silence, cracking a soda can that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. So, she hedged her bets, he finally said. I looked at him, confused by the cold logic. Gavin leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Think about it, Brody. Jocelyn watches you sweat and bleed to build the bank account. Meanwhile, Wade is right there in the office, feeding her lines about how he is the real brains behind the operation. It sounded paranoid at first, but the pieces clicked into place like a manifold. She did not just fall into bed with him by accident. She was securing the money and the fun simultaneously. The next morning brought a hangover of reality that no amount of coffee could fix. I called the contract attorney who drafted our original partnership agreement 5 years ago. He charged $500 just to tell me I was screwed. Without documented cause, Wade can force a buyout, he explained in a dry, bored tone. Based on your current contracts, fair market value for his shares is over $300,000. I felt the blood drain from my face. I did not have that kind of cash. What about the house? I asked, gripping the phone tight enough to crack the screen. She is not on the deed. The lawyer sighed, the sound of a man who has seen this train wreck 1,000 times. Arizona law is tricky. If she has been there long enough, she has tenant rights. You need a formal eviction notice. 30 days minimum. If she contested it or played the pregnancy card, it could take months. Every direction I turned, I was bleeding money I didn't have. My phone started buzzing around noon and did not stop for 6 hours. Jocelyn sent wall after wall of text messages. I never meant to hurt you. We need to talk about this like adults. I am scared and I need to know I have a safe place to stay. She was weaponizing her fear. Then came Wade's messages, even worse in their audacity. Brother, don't let emotions destroy the company. We have that casino deal to think about. The nerve was breathtaking. I read Wade's message again, staring at the word, brother, until it blurred. Gavin snatched the phone from my hand and scrolled through the thread. They are terrified, he said, tossing the device back onto the couch. They are still playing the game because they think they can manipulate you into accepting this. It hit me then. Wade was broke. Jocelyn had expensive taste and no savings. They didn't want maturity. They wanted me to keep paying the mortgage while they played house. The lawyer's words echoed in my head. Documented cause. If I could prove Wade violated the partnership agreement, the buyout became a negotiation, not a ransom. I stood up, the exhaustion replaced by a cold, vibrating energy. They want me to be rational? I asked, grabbing my laptop bag. Fine. I will be rational. They wanted me to play the provider, but they forgot I am the guy who reads the fine print. I wasn't just looking at a broken heart anymore. I was hunting. I spent the next 4 nights living at Gavin's dining room table. It became a graveyard of Chinese takeout boxes and empty energy drink cans. I printed every bank statement, credit card receipt, and invoice from the last 3 years. The paper stack was 6 inches thick and smelled like toner and desperation. Gavin watched television in the other room, occasionally checking to see if I had cracked. I wasn't sleeping. I was cross, referencing my life against a spreadsheet of lies. The patterns emerged on the second night, like invisible ink under heat. I found a charge for $600 at stake 4 on a Tuesday. I checked my work log for that date. I had been on a rooftop in Mesa until midnight fixing a compressor while Wade was supposedly networking. He wasn't networking. He was eating Wagyu beef with my fiancée. The charge was categorized as client development. The only thing developing was his audacity. I dug deeper into the travel expenses, my eyes burning from the screen glare. There were charges for hotel suites in Sedona and spa packages in Scottsdale. Dates matched perfectly with weekends. Jocelyn claimed she was visiting her mother. He had charged the room service, the massages, and the rental cars to the company account. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I had literally paid for the romantic getaways where they conceived the baby that ruined my life. On night 3, I hacked into Wade's company email archive. He was sloppy, arrogant enough to think I would never check. I found dozens of threads where he introduced himself to new clients as the senior partner and owner. He described me to vendors as the technical execution lead, effectively demoting me in my own company. He was not just stealing money. He was systematically stealing my reputation while I was busy doing the actual work. One email to a casino developer made my blood boil. Brody is great with the wrench turning. Wade wrote, but the strategic vision comes from my end. He had even included his personal cell number, telling them to bypass the main office line. This was a breach of fiduciary duty in black and white. He was diverting business opportunities to himself while taking a salary from our joint funds. He was a parasite feeding on the host he planned to kill. By the fourth sunrise, I had the final number tallied in a red column. $37,000 in unauthorized personal expenses over 18 months. That was money that should have gone to new equipment or employee bonuses. It was money I could have used to pay down the debt that kept me awake at night. Instead, it went to financing Wade's lifestyle while I ate gas station burritos. This wasn't just bad partnership ethics anymore. This was grand larceny. I saved the spreadsheet to a thumb drive and 3 different cloud accounts. I emailed the file to my attorney with a subject line that just said, cause. The sun was coming up over the complex, casting long shadows across Gavin's living room. I wasn't just looking at a broken heart or a ruined friendship anymore. I was looking at a felony. I closed the laptop with a snap. They wanted a mature resolution, but they were about to get a criminal investigation. The eviction notice hit the doorstep at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. I didn't deliver it myself. I hired a process server who looked like a linebacker and didn't ask questions. Arizona law required a 30-day notice, even though her name wasn't on the deed, and my lawyer insisted we do everything by the book. Jocelyn texted me exactly 4 minutes later. You can't do this to a pregnant woman, she wrote. I didn't reply. I just forwarded the screenshot to my attorney's cloud folder. That afternoon, while she was out at a prenatal appointment, I executed the next phase. I brought 3 of my biggest guys to the house to move the heavy stuff. We cleared out my grandfather's watch collection, my power tools, and the safe containing the company's incorporation papers. We moved like a pit crew, efficient and silent. I wasn't just packing boxes, I was surgically removing my history from a house that had become a crime scene. By the time she returned, the garage was empty. The most important addition wasn't what I took out, but what I put in. I installed high-definition security cameras in the living room, kitchen, and hallway. They were small, discrete black nodes that uploaded footage directly to a remote server. My lawyer had been crystal clear about the risks of a domestic dispute. Assume you are always being recorded, she said. So make sure you are recording them back. I tested the angles twice. The living room view covered the entire sectional where my life ended. The backlash started before the sun went down. My phone vibrated with a notification from Instagram, where I was tagged in a story that made my stomach turn. Jocelyn posted a selfie with tear-streaked cheeks, holding her baby bump like a shield. The caption was a masterpiece of fiction about being abandoned and homeless due to a narcissist's cruelty. She didn't mention the affair. She didn't mention the embezzlement. She just painted a target on my back and handed out ammunition to every mutual friend we had. Wade opened a second front on the business side. I got a call from the property manager at the medical center we serviced. Wade told me you are having a breakdown, she said, her voice tight with concern. He said, you've been drinking on job sites and that we should hold off on the contract renewal. My hand tightened around the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. He was scorching the earth to cover his retreat. He didn't care if the company survived as long as I suffered. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post the bank records and the eviction notice for the world to see. Instead, I drove to the storage unit and sat in the dark with my grandfather's toolbox. Her mother called me 3 times, leaving voicemails that ranged from pleading to threatening. I didn't delete them. I didn't respond to the comments calling me a monster. I just saved every single file to the case folder. Silence was not weakness anymore. Silence was the trap snapping shut. The 30 days bled out into a final 48-hour warning. I scheduled the final walkthrough inspection for 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. It was strictly to document damages, but I knew they wouldn't let me walk in and out peacefully. I called Paul, my lead technician, and told him to meet me there. "Bring your phone," I said, "and keep the camera app open." I wasn't going there to inspect the paint. I was going there to let them hang themselves. Paul and I pulled up to the house at 10 sharp. Wade's black Silverado was already blocking the driveway, parked at an aggressive angle like he owned the concrete. I checked my watch and looked at Paul. Phone in hand, I reminded him, "Record the second the door opens." Paul nodded, his face grim. He knew the stakes. I walked up the path to my own front door, feeling like a stranger visiting a crime scene. The key felt heavy in my hand. Wade swung the door open before I could even knock. He was wearing a crisp polo shirt with the price tag still hanging off the sleeve, trying desperately to look like the respectable man of the house. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice dead level. "Helping Jocelyn pack," he said, blocking the threshold with his shoulder. "She invited me." The arrogance was breathtaking. He was trespassing in a house I paid for, acting like the landlord. The living room was a disaster of cardboard boxes and packing tape. Jocelyn emerged from the bedroom, clutching a polished wooden box that made my heart stop. It was my grandfather's coin collection, the one thing I explicitly told her never to touch. "Put that down," I said. She hugged it to her chest, her eyes flashing with entitlement. "You gave me access to everything?" She spat. "That makes it community property. I am taking it for the baby." "We are not married, and that is an heirloom," I said, pointing a shaking finger at the floor. "Taking it is theft." Paul is recording this, by the way. Jocelyn froze, her eyes darting to Paul's phone, held steadily at chest height. She set the box down on a stack of magazines like it was radioactive. That was when Wade stepped into my personal space. He smelled of nervous sweat and cheap cologne. "You can't talk to her like that," he growled. "You have zero rights here, Wade," I said, locking eyes with him. "You are a trespasser. You have 5 minutes to leave." His face turned a blotchy red. The smooth salesman mask cracked, revealing the desperate coward underneath. He shoved me hard with both hands, sending me stumbling back into the wall. My head cracked against the drywall. I didn't swing back. I didn't even raise my hands. I just looked at Paul's camera lens, knowing it caught every single frame. "Do it again?" I said softly. Wade took the bait immediately. He shoved me harder this time, knocking a picture frame off the wall. That was the signal. Jocelyn started screaming at the top of her lungs, a high-pitched wail designed to alert the neighbors. "He is attacking Wade!" she shrieked, looking directly at the ceiling. "Call the police! He is crazy!" It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, but she forgot one crucial detail. Paul was still filming her. The sirens wailed in the distance less than 2 minutes later. They had called the cops on themselves. I stood motionless against the wall, watching them pant with fake adrenaline. Wade looked at me with a smirk, thinking his word against mine would win. He didn't know about the surveillance cameras I installed last week, or that Paul's video was already uploading to the cloud. They thought they were framing me. They were actually directing their own booking photos. Two officers walked in, hands resting near their belts, scanning the chaotic room. Wade immediately launched into his rehearsed speech, pointing a trembling finger at me. He went crazy. Wade shouted, his voice cracking with fake desperation. He attacked me and threatened the mother of his child. Jocelyn was right on cue, sobbing into a dish towel she had pulled from a box. I stayed silent, my back against the wall, watching the performance with a detached curiosity. The lead officer looked at me, then at the scattered boxes, his expression unreadable. He asked for my side, but I just reached for Paul's phone. I don't want to tell you a story, I said, handing the device over. I want to show you the movie. The officer watched the screen, eyebrows knitting together as the footage played. He saw Wade shoving me, while I stood like a statue. He saw Jocelyn look at the ceiling and scream, on command like a director yelled action. The color drained from Wade's face as the audio echoed in the silent room. The officer looked up, his eyes hard and cold. The dynamic in the room shifted instantly from domestic dispute to criminal investigation. Turn around and place your hands behind your back, the officer said, pulling his cuffs. Wade stammered, trying to backpedal, but the metal clicked shut with a sound of finality. Jocelyn stopped crying instantly, her mouth hanging open in genuine shock. You are being detained for assault and battery. The officer continued, reciting rights that Wade was too panicked to process. They took Jocelyn aside for questioning regarding a false police report. I watched them load Wade into the back of the cruiser. He looked at me through the window, his eyes wide with the realization that his charm had finally run out. The second the cruiser pulled away, I drove straight to the office. It was Saturday night, the building empty and echoing. I logged into the admin portal and froze every single company account. Credit cards, fuel cards, vendor access. I cut the lines one by one. I changed the locks on the front door in the server room, my hands moving with mechanical precision. I wasn't just securing the perimeter, I was performing an amputation. I printed the finalized forensic audit report, the one showing the 37 grand in theft. This was the bullet I had been saving for the kill shot. My attorney met me on Sunday morning, her office smelling of expensive coffee and victory. She reviewed the arrest report and the audit with a shark-like grin. We have him on criminal assault and felony embezzlement, she said, tapping the papers. This is no longer a negotiation about his share value. This is a dissolution for cause. She drafted the letter immediately, citing breach of fiduciary duty and moral turpitude. We weren't just kicking him out of the company. We were ensuring he left with nothing but debt. The strategy was simple: destroy his leverage before he could make bail. Monday morning was the start of the real war. I had a list of 23 active clients Wade had been managing. I called the biggest one first, the casino resort developer in Tucson. We are undergoing an internal restructuring due to ethical violations, I told him, keeping my voice professional and steady. The developer was hesitant, mentioning the concerns Wade had raised about my stability. I took a deep breath. It was time to play the tortious interference card. I asked if he wanted to hear the recording of Wade bragging about overcharging him to fund a personal vacation. I played the audio file I had pulled from the cloud server. Wade's voice filled the speakerphone, laughing about padding the invoices for the casino job to cover his suit in Vegas. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "That son of a bitch," the developer finally whispered. He told me those change orders were mandatory code upgrades. I explained that I would personally oversee the project and refund every cent Wade had stolen. The client didn't just stay, he offered to testify. Wade's attempt to poison the well had only poisoned himself. The rest of the calls followed a similar pattern of revelation and damage control. I systematically dismantled the lies Wade had planted for months. Clients who thought I was an unstable alcoholic learned I was actually the one fixing the messes Wade left behind. I sent over the police report from the eviction to the ones who needed extra convincing. By noon, I had retained 90% of our contracts. The other 10% were the ones Wade had already lost through incompetence. I was reclaiming my territory, acre by acre, while he sat in a holding cell. Wade's lawyer called my attorney at 4 o'clock that afternoon. His tone was drastically different from the arrogant demands of the previous weeks. He sounded tired, defeated, and desperate to cut a deal. "My client is facing serious criminal charges," he said, the fight completely gone from his voice. "I can't fight a multi-front war." He floated the idea of a voluntary resignation if we dropped the civil fraud suit. I looked at my attorney and smiled for the first time in months. They were not negotiating anymore, they were begging for mercy. The scorched earth policy had worked perfectly. The conference room at my attorney's office was freezing, kept at a temperature meant to discourage small talk. I sat at the head of the mahogany table, flanked by Gavin and my lawyer, watching the clock tick past 9. The air smelled of lemon polish and aggressive litigation. Wade was late, a final petty power move from a man who had no power left. When the door finally opened, he didn't stride in with his usual salesman bounce. He shuffled in, looking like a ghost haunting his own funeral. He had aged 10 years in 2 weeks. His suit, usually tailored to perfection, hung off his frame like he had shrunk. In the wash, dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes, and he hadn't shaved in days. He couldn't even meet my gaze. He sat opposite me, shrinking into the high, backed leather chair as if hoping it would swallow him whole. His attorney, a tired man with a cheap briefcase, started arranging papers with the nervous energy of someone who knew he was holding a losing hand. My lawyer didn't waste time with pleasantries or coffee offers. She slid a single thick folder across the polished wood, the sound loud in the silence. "We are not here to debate the partnership agreement," she stated, her voice razor sharp. "We are here to discuss whether your client leaves this room with a shred of his future intact." She opened the folder, revealing the forensic audit, the assault photos, and the client affidavits. It was an autopsy of his career laid out in high definition. Wade's lawyer cleared his throat, trying to sound authoritative, but failing miserably. "My client acknowledges there were irregularities in the accounting," he mumbled, avoiding the word theft. "However, his 40% stake is valued at over $300,000. We believe a settlement is appropriate." I almost laughed out loud. They still thought this was a transaction. They didn't understand that I wasn't buying him out. I was offering him a lifeline to keep him from drowning in a sea of lawsuits. "There is no settlement," I said, breaking my silence for the first time. "There is restitution." I slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a transfer of ownership agreement. The purchase price was typed clearly in the center $1. Wade stared at the number, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. This covers the embezzlement, the fraud, and the emotional damages, I explained. You sign this, and I agree not to sue you into bankruptcy for the next decade. Wade looked up, a spark of his old indignation flaring in his eyes. $1. You can't be serious, Brody. We built this together. He looked at me, searching for the friend he had betrayed, but that guy was gone. I have a baby on the way. I have legal fees. You can't leave me with nothing. He was actually trying to use the child he conceived with my fiancée as leverage for a payout. The audacity was so thick I could taste it on my tongue like copper. My attorney leaned forward, effectively cutting off his oxygen supply. If you don't sign, we file the civil fraud suit tomorrow, she said calmly. We will attach lines to your truck, your future wages, and any assets you have left. The criminal charges for assault are already proceeding. Do you really want to add grand larceny to your rap sheet? Wade looked at his own lawyer for help, but the man just stared at the table and gave a microscopic nod. The room went dead silent. Wade picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly the tip tapped a rhythm against the paper. He hesitated for a long second, looking at the door like he might run, but he knew there was nowhere to go. He scrawled his signature on the line, signing away 5 years of work for less than the cost of a soda. He pushed the paper back to me, his eyes wet and red. It was done. The parasite was finally excised from the host. As Wade stood up to leave, grabbing his jacket like a shield, Gavin spoke up from the corner. He had been silent the whole time, pretending to read a magazine. Congratulations, Wade, he said, his voice dripping with mock sincerity. You just set the Arizona state record for the most expensive affair in history. Wade flinched as if he'd been slapped. 6 months of sneaking around cost you 300 grand and your career, Gavin added. I hope she was worth it, buddy. Wade didn't look back. I sat there for a moment, holding the contract that cost me a single crisp dollar bill. My phone vibrated on the table, lighting up with a familiar name I hadn't seen in weeks. Jocelyn. She must have heard the news, realizing her meal ticket had just signed away his assets. I watched the phone buzz, vibrating against the mahogany grain, until the screen went dark. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt the cool, smooth texture of the paper in my hand. 8 months later, the silence in my office was the best sound I had ever heard. The company wasn't just surviving, it was a machine. Paul was running operations, handling the day headaches while I focused on expansion. We finished the casino project 3 weeks early, earning a performance bonus that covered the legal fees from the breakup. I stood by the window looking at the clean fleet of trucks below. No drama, no secrets. Just work. It felt like I could finally breathe without a heavy weight on my chest. The intercom buzzed, breaking the quiet. Paul's voice came through, tight and strange. Boss, you have visitors in the lobby. They don't have an appointment. I checked the schedule, frowning. Who is it, Paul? Just send them away. There was a long pause, the kind that makes the hair on your neck stand up. It's Wade and Jocelyn, he whispered. They say it is urgent. Do you want me to call the cops? I felt a cold ripple, not fear, but a morbid curiosity. I told Paul to let them in. When the door opened, I barely recognized them. Wade had lost 40 pounds, his clothes hanging off him like a scarecrow. His hair was thinning, the swagger completely evaporated. Jocelyn looked even worse, wearing cheap clothes and carrying a knock-off purse. The glamour was gone, scrubbed away by harsh reality. They stood near the door, afraid to step onto the carpet. They looked like strangers who had survived a shipwreck. I watched safely from the shore. Wade cleared his throat, pulling out a wrinkled folder. Brody? Man, I know things ended badly. He started, his voice shaking. But we have been doing some soul searching. He actually tried to pitch a partnership. He proposed that I keep ownership while they worked for equity to rebuild their lives. Jocelyn jumped in, eyes welling with tears. We have nowhere else to go, she sobbed. My parents cut us off. Wade can't find work. We need you. It was a masterclass in delusion. I didn't feel the anger I expected. I just looked at the man who stole from me and the woman who cheated on me, and I felt absolutely nothing. You are asking me to fund your consequences? I said, leaning back in my chair. That isn't how this works. Wade tried to pull the Brotherhood card one last time. Remember what we built, he pleaded. That has to count for something. I shook my head slowly. It counted when I bought you out for $1. Paul stepped forward, opening the door wide. They realized, finally, that the well was dry. Jocelyn started weeping loudly, but it sounded like background noise now. Wade slumped his shoulders and turned to leave, defeated by his own choices. I watched them walk out of my building and into the brutal Arizona heat. I turned back to my computer and opened a new project file. The knot in my stomach was gone. I wasn't their savior anymore. I was just a man with work to do.